Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm sorry to be late in starting. I have had a technical problem for some time that I've had to resolve before I could go live. But I am live now without the customary introductions. But anyway, I'm your host, Joe Firestone, and my topics for tonight are the impact of Raeisi's death, the Biden-China fracas, and hypocrisy about the International Criminal Court. And I will be I see I do have some people here. Thank you for coming. Thank you for hanging in here. I just explained I was late in starting due to a technical problem. I usually don't have those problems, but I did have a serious problem tonight that I had to get over. So I have gotten it over. I am starting the show with a piece on the destabilizing impacts of helicopter disaster in Iran. Here's a picture of President Ibrahim Raeisi, who was killed in a helicopter crash over the weekend, speaking ahead of the 31st anniversary of Ayatollah Khomeini's death on June 3rd. Well, he was speaking on June 3rd, 2022. Of course, the death of Ayatollah Khomeini's death was 33 years before 2022. What was that? Sometime in the 2090s. Anyway, let us get to the article. Of course, by now you've all heard of the death of Ibrahim Raeisi and of the process that's now going on in Iran to permanently replace him. He was immediately replaced, maybe I should say succeeded, as the acting president by the first vice president. But he is a figure whose main job is now to preside over the coming elections, in Iran, which have to occur within 50 days, of the vacating of the presidency, in this case due to death. The subtitle says, at a time when the war in Gaza is continuing and Iran's shadowy war with Israel has come into the open, there is no question that the deaths of Iran's president, foreign minister, and other high-level officials will have deep repercussions. This article was written by Mohammed Sahimi, comes from Responsible Statecraft, which is an American publication based here, dated May 21st, 2024. Iran's president, foreign minister, and several other high-level officials lost their lives on Sunday when their helicopter crashed in a mountainous area in northwest Iran. Iranian President Ibrahim Raeisi was an ultra-hardliner who had been handpicked in 2021 by Supreme Leader the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, not Khomeini in this instance, Ali Khamenei, whose name sounds very much alike to Western ears, but completely different person, to be Iran's president. Before his election, Raeisi had a long career in the judiciary and a notorious and well-documented track record for violating the human rights of the Iranian people. Raeisi played an important role in the execution of nearly 4,000 political prisoners during the summer of 1988 as Tehran prosecutor from 1989 to 1994. He arrested and prosecuted leading nationalist religious figures who had played important roles in the revolution in 1979 during the Green Movement of 2009 to 2010, when Raeisi was serving as the principal deputy of the judiciary chief. He declared that the demonstrators should be executed and played an important role in the crackdown in the aftermath of the movement. As the prosecutor of the Special Court for the Clergy, an unconstitutional and extrajudicial court from 2012, he persecuted dissident clerics opposed to Khamenei's rule, and after demonstrators broke out in Gaza in September of 2022, in the aftermath of the death of Mahsa Amini, a young woman who had lost her life while in detention, Raeisi took a hard line against the demonstrators. The economic performance of the Raeisi demonstration over the past 3 years has been dismal. He has not been able to deliver on any of his promises, from reducing rampant inflation, estimated to hover around 50%, to building 4 million new houses for low-income people. I have to add here that what I've heard is that the economic performance of the Raeisi administration over the past few years has been very, very good, that growth rates inside of Iran are solid, that the economy is going along very well, or has been going along very well, and that the people are happy with it. Going on with the article though, in foreign policy, Raeisi had promised that his administration would negotiate with the United States regarding a return to the nuclear agreement, officially known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or the JCPOA, but his hardline approach was not successful, and the negotiations stalled. I have to add here that his hardline approach, his approach to the negotiation seemed very reasonable to me. He was asking the United States to come back into the JCPOA and to remedy the problems the U.S. had caused by renouncing the treaty under Trump. These seem to be perfectly reasonable demands. Okay, to me, I think going back into the JCPOA turned out to be impossible. But I think the negotiation with the United States wasn't going along well, because the United States was not willing to negotiate. What we wanted was for Iran to come back into the JCPOA, okay, and we would do nothing. We would not even promise that we would come back in. So these negotiations stalled, but I believe it was the U.S.'s fault as to why these negotiations stalled. Anyway, the article goes on, thus aside from his hardline supporters, who make up about 10 to 15% of the population, hardly anyone will shed any tears for him. Well, here I have to add that the Chinese and Russians will certainly shed tears for him, because he did go into BRICS under their sponsorship. He did support the Russians in their war in the Ukraine area by helping them out with their supply of drones. Turns out Iranian drones were very important, okay, in their war effort. Okay, and Raeisi was very instrumental in getting them those drones, and in terms of his creating or helping to create the military capability of Iran, which allowed them to become a drone power. Furthermore, there was a triumvirate beginning to come together at the time of his death among the Russians, the Chinese, okay, and the Iranians, and business deals were being done which were very favorable to the Iranians. The future looked extremely promising, and so his death is destabilizing, but it's destabilizing in relation to whether the progress that had been made between these three powers would be continued. I think this article is maybe very good on the domestic impact. In other words, some of the failures of the Raeisi regime, but I think it's very biased in not mentioning any of the successes of the Raeisi regime. But going on, thus aside from his hardline supporters who make up about 10 to 15% of the population, hardly anyone will shed any tears for him. I think that remains to be seen. We will see over the next few days whether anyone is shedding any tears for him. Raisi's death will nevertheless contribute to the complex dynamics of Iran's internal politics, including the fierce power struggle among various conservative and moderate factions. Well, that may be very important, but I'm sure that there are lefty factions involved here too, and that they're involved in the power struggle as well. Go on with the article. The most important issue facing Iran, and particularly the conservatives, who will succeed Khamenei as the next supreme leader. He is 85 years old and has been known for years to be ill, although the Western press has at times exaggerated the extent of his illness. In 2015, Khamenei appointed Raeisi to the highly important post of chairman of Astan Quds Rezaveh in Mashhad, placing him in control of the shrine of Imam Reza, Shia Islam's eighth Imam, and its vast assets totaling tens of billions of dollars. Many interpreted that decision as a signal that Raisi would be a candidate for succeeding Khamenei, and yes, indeed, he was a very serious candidate. I think going into this accident that killed him, he was probably the leading internal candidate to succeed the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. The plausibility of the interpretation was strengthened when immediately after Raisi's appointment, senior officers from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, visited Raisi in Mashhad, treating him as a sort of future national leader. That was the first sign that Raisi was rising among the hardliners with the support of Khamenei and his son, Khamenei's son, that is, Moshtaba, a shadowy figure whom many also consider as another potential to his father. Raisi ran in the presidential elections in 2017, but lost badly to President Hassan Rouhani, who was considered a moderate, of course, and who was instrumental. Well, I guess he wasn't instrumental in negotiations of the JCPOA, because by then the JCPOA had concluded by earlier presidents. Raisi's main source of support was the Jebha Paydari Enqalabi Islami, JPE, the Front of Stability of Islamic Revolution, who were followers of the reactionary and hardline cleric Mohammad Taji Mesbah-Yazdi, who lived from 1935 to 2021. Although they always professed their loyalty to Khamenei, over the past several years, fissures have emerged between the JPE and those who are close to the Ba'ath Rakhbari, the office of the Supreme Leader, and Moshtaba Khamenei, who plays a key role in it. These fissures become more transparent in the most recent elections for the Majlis, Iran's parliament, held in March of this year, when the younger Khamenei's father-in-law, who was close to the Supreme Leader, criticized the JPE, as did some of the mouthpieces of the IRGC. The Majlis elections were held simultaneously with those for the Assembly of Experts. Constitutional body whose most important task is to elect the new supreme leader. By vetting the candidates, the hardliners prevented moderate clerics such as Rouhani from running in those elections. This set the stage for a succession showdown between various hardline factions, namely supporters of Mushtaba Khamenei, Raeisi, and perhaps a dark horse candidate like Golem Hossein Mohseni Ejei, the hardline judiciary chief who recently criticized Raisi implicitly over economic corruption. Some in Iran believe that helping Raisi to become Iran's president was in fact a trap set for him by the younger Khamenei to showcase Raisi's incompetence. Indeed, the dismal performance of Iran's economy under Raisi, coupled with his administration's poor planning and rampant corruption, would have severely complicated his chances of becoming supreme leader. This is according to the author. That's not what I've been reading. According to the Islamic Republic's constitution, national elections should be held to elect the next president within 15 days of Raisi's death. And I think that will happen because I think the Islamic Republic takes its constitution very, very seriously. I would add to what I said before about foreign policy. One other foreign policy accomplishment recently, which was very, very important, was the retaliation by Iran to Israel's attack on the consulate in Syria. That was a very, very measured retaliation, which proved to the Israelis that the Iranians have the capability to breach the Iron Dome and attack in Israel wherever they like with the Iranian ballistic missiles. And so that retaliation was followed by a very minor retaliation by the Israelis. And so it seems as though Raisi performed very, very well in that particular situation because, of course, he helped to design the very measured but effective response to the Israelis. And that was a tremendous accomplishment. Only 30 to 40% of eligible voters, going on in the article, participated in the recent Majlis elections. That's true. A low turnover that has alarmed many, even among the regime's supporters, since the ruling elite had always interpreted the high turnout of voters in the past elections as a sign of the legitimacy of its political system. The question is, will Khamenei use the opportunity of Raisi's death to allow for more open elections with the hope of shoring up his regime's legitimacy? In addition, given Raisi's deep unpopularity among masses, his funeral, and the upcoming elections, and again, I doubt how deep his popularity is among the masses, but we shall see, may provide an opportunity for the Iranian people to once again demonstrate their frustrations with the terrible state of the economy, as well as social and political repression. Again, that remains to be seen, but I'm glad he pointed that out because we can see whether there will be demonstrations of the frustrations with the terrible state of the economy, as well as frustrations against the social and the political repression. Given that the most important reason for Raisi's rise to the presidency was his loyalty to Khamenei, who will be the loudest candidate in the upcoming elections, there is no shortage of candidates among the hardliners, but none can advance without Khamenei's support, and it is not yet clear who will have his backing. Finally, how will Raisi's death affect the question of a successor to Khamenei? Will new candidates emerge? Will Raisi's death lead to the possibility of a more moderate successor to Khamenei? What will be the role of the IRGC in selecting the successor? Given Iran's complex political dynamics, these are not easy questions to address, but particularly at a time when the war in Gaza is continuing and Iran's shadowy war with Israel is coming to the open, there's no question that what happens in Iran will have repercussions for the entire Middle East. And I do agree with that. And I do agree with his analysis of the complex political dynamics here, but I think he's too negative when it comes to Raeisi's performance, and that we have to note that the economy is performing very well right now, and that his foreign policy has had notable successes, very notable successes. So I think he's going to be a lot more popular than this author, Mohammed Sahimi, thinks. But this remains to be seen, and we will know fairly soon. I need to take a moment off here to make sure this is shared on Facebook. So if you give me a moment. Turns out it did get shared to Facebook, at least by some people. And right now, I will share it as well. So now back to the stream. I thought that was a very, very interesting article, but has to be taken with the grains of salt, which I introduced into it, the very large grains of salt that I introduced into it. I'd like to move on now to the second of our topics, which is the Biden-China fracas. A little better title of it. IK. What a tragic accident, this crash. Yes, if it was an accident. Hi, Kay. Thank you for coming. Jeff Denton. Yes, Jeff. Steve Wolfbrand says hi. Hi, Stevie. I was a little late tonight due to technical difficulties, but I'm going to share the screen now for the second of our topics. This is from Unheard, and it's by Thomas Fazzi, okay, who is a European writer who co-authored a book with Bill Mitchell on the Eurozone not too many years ago. This piece was published on May 18th, 2024. And Thomas Fazzi says, Biden won't win his war with China. America's gamble could upend the global status quo. Does Biden have a war with China? Well, Thomas Fazzi does think so. So let us see what he has to say. Oh, by the way, Lisa sent a message just a moment ago pointing out that RFK Jr. has been spending $1 million a month on security. There is a YouTube, about that. Sometime later this week, we'll be talking some more about what RFK Jr. is doing, because he recently had another disaster with respect to his pronouncements on Israel and Gaza. But anyway, we'll go into that sometime later this week. So, when Donald Trump introduced a series of tariffs on Chinese goods just over 5 years ago, Joe Biden was among his fiercest critics. Trump, he said, was, quote, crushing America, farmers, workers, consumers, by sparking an, quote, irresponsible trade war, unquote, and he vowed to reverse his, quote, senseless policies, unquote. But once in power, Biden did the exact opposite. He actually strengthened Trump's protectionist policies, quote, excuse me, launching, quote, a full-blown economic war on China, unquote. How characteristic of Joe Biden. Did he lie about his intentions or just change his mind on a dime in response to the first economic trade advisor he talked to? Who knows? Last week, that war escalated to near nuclear level as the White House announced massive tariff hikes on a raft of Chinese imports, including 25% on steel and aluminum, 50% on semiconductors and solar panels, and a staggering 100% on electric vehicles. The move, they say, is in response to, quote, China's unfair trade practices, unquote. The U.S. accuses Beijing of using hefty government subsidies to flood global markets with artificially low priced exports by imposing its swinging tariffs. The U.S. hopes to create, quote, a level playing field in industries that are vital to our future, unquote, and ensure America leads the world in these sectors. It's pretty ironic that Biden is attempting to level the playing field by embracing similar tactics to Beijing. His administration's much vaunted Inflation Reduction Act includes almost $400 billion in subsidies through grants, loans, and tax credits aimed at boosting the U.S. clean tech sector. So Biden's attempts to pay China as a rogue nation using, quote, non-market practices, unquote, to, quote, game the system, unquote, seem driven by fear and that the Chinese subsidies risk nullifying the effect of America's own subsidies. U.S. Secretary of the Treasury Janet Yellen acknowledged as much when she said that, quote, China is really not playing by the rules in the sense that they have enormous subsidies in critical areas of advanced manufacturing, unquote. And, quote, Biden wants to make sure that the stimulus that's being provided through the Inflation Reduction Act supports these industries, unquote. She seemed blissfully unaware of the contradictory nature of her statement, barely concealed by the doublespeak. China subsidizes its industries, that's bad, while the U.S. supports them, that's good. Okay, but then the idea of America as a bastion of the free market, whose corporations achieve global success simply by relying on the animal spirits of capitalism and the sheer ingenuity of garage inventors a la Steve Jobs, is largely a myth. Everyone knows that Silicon Valley's transformation into a hotbed of innovation and the subsequent rise of the U.S. tech industry was made possible thanks to massive funding from the U.S. government and military during the Cold War. Elon Musk is only the latest in a line of supposedly self-made garage inventors who have actually built their tech support with the help of billions of dollars in U.S. government subsidies. I noticed, by the way, that Thomas Fazzi did not say with the help of billions of dollars of taxpayer money, but billions of dollars of U.S. government subsidies. Thomas Fazzi knows too much to talk about taxpayer money. Just last year, Tesla received $7.5 billion from the U.S. government. Whoa. No wonder he's a 100 billionaire. China then isn't really doing anything different from what the U.S. has always done. But the U.S. is riled because China is winning. And having taken up the role of free trade defender, accusing the Biden administration of, quote, impeding the normal functioning of global industrial and supply chains, Beijing is forcing the U.S. to take an increasingly protectionist stance. This peculiar reversal of roles is paradigmatic of the significant global economic and geopolitical power shift underway. Quote, free trade, unquote, generally tends to benefit the dominant economic power at the expense of weaker economies. All I have to say about that is no shit. It is no coincidence that the U.S. began preaching, quote, free trade, unquote, only after it achieved economic dominance in the mid-20th century, after resorting to heavily protectionist measures to support its manufacturing sectors, just as Britain had done before it. But China has since surpassed the U.S. as the world's manufacturing powerhouse and it has now climbed all the way to the top of the value chain. The United States embraces of protectionism is therefore an admission of weakness, as it is demoted to no longer hegemonic status. In this respect, it makes sense for the U.S. to not want to be completely dependent on China in increasingly critical manufacturing centers and to build up its own clean tech industrial base. Absolutely, Tom Fazzi. I'm so glad you said so. To shore this industry up, the U.S. has been trying to nurture the domestic solar supply chain through a mix of tax incentives and tariffs for over a decade, but so far has failed abysmally. As the French entrepreneur and political commentator Arnaud Bertrand noted, while the tariffs did considerably reduce the number of Chinese solar panels coming to the United States, with an 86% drop over the 2012 to 2020 period, the billions in subsidies from first Obama and then Biden did not revitalize the U.S. solar industry. On the contrary, the American global market share of the solar industry has considerably decreased since the original tariffs were placed on Chinese solar panels from 9% in 2010 to 2% today. Meanwhile, China's share of the industry rose from 59% to 78%. There's no reason to believe the recent tariff increase will reverse this trend. There's even less hope that they will help spur a domestic EV industry. EV stands, of course, for electric vehicles. There's also a catch-22 at play here, because by shielding American car manufacturers from Chinese competition, any development is likely to be hindered. But without the tariffs, U.S. manufacturers struggle to survive the decade, since Americans' cars cost between double or triple the amount of their Chinese equivalents. So the government may artificially prop up the American auto industry for a few more years at the expense of American consumers, but by doing so, it is only delaying its death, not saving it. The idea that the tariffs will help America, quote, lead the world in this or other sectors, which China already controls most of the global market share, such as steel, aluminum, and EVs, is an economically illiterate one, especially when you consider that the U.S. market represents a relatively small share of Chinese global sales, that America's declining status means it can no longer impose its will on other countries. It'll be lucky if it can get its sub-imperial vassals in Europe and Asia to get on board with its short-sighted trade war. In fact, Biden's EV tariff hike is already further weakening America's crumbling powerhouse status. Those EU member states with big automotive ties to China, such as Germany and Sweden, have voiced their objections, reluctant to match the United States or put tariffs on the imports at all. Quote, we don't want to dismantle global trade. That's a stupid idea, unquote, Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson said. Quote, punitive tariffs as a one-size-fits-all solution is not a good idea for importing and exporting countries. When we consider what kinds of technologies are being targeted by the tariffs, the optics are even worse for Biden. For years, he has presented himself as the champion of climate policies and emphasized the need to move towards low-emission technologies, one of the stated aims of the Inflation Reduction Act. Yet he is now attempting to punish China for managing to produce low-cost green tech, including EVs that could turbocharge the world's next industrial revolution. Indeed, China has been able to achieve outstanding results in this sector, in large part because it has embraced much more ambitious green industrial policies than the West. Moreover, Biden's imposition of these tariffs risks hindering the adoption of low-emission technologies by American businesses and consumers, and thereby thwarting the U.S.'s own climate targets. It's a messy own goal. Those skeptical of the need for climate policies and their achievements probably don't think it's a big deal, but it is a big deal for a lot of people, especially Biden voters. And this policy, even though probably aimed at shoring up support for the president by showing voters that his stuff on China, could alienate many of those voters. The economist Danny Roderick of Harvard, by the way, captured the sentiment of many in the progressive camp when he said, put up tariffs, quote, put up tariffs as you must, but the moral, economic, environmental arguments are on the side of those that subsidize green products, not those who want to tax them. You don't have to agree with him to understand the huge political gamble that Biden has taken by declaring a full-blown trade war on China, the unintended consequences of which could cost him his presidency and hammer the final nail in the coffin of America's powerhouse status. So what is Thomas Fazzi doing here? What he's doing is he's not claiming that free trade is good in all circumstances. Okay, he's not suggesting that. Okay, at all. What he's suggesting is that we subsidize our climate industries heavily and keep on subsidizing the climate industries also very, very heavily so that they don't have to make a profit. Spend as much money as needed in order to make that happen, because we do need to have a strong climate industry here. We do need to have an EV industry that is very strong here. Let that industry copy Chinese technology as they have copied the technology of other people. Of course, I'm not saying China's there because it's copied everything. That's not so. It's there because it's been extremely competent. What we have to do is to match its competence and to nurture our own industries. But we don't need to do it through tariffs. We need to do it through subsidies. And if the World Trade Organization doesn't like it, we need to withdraw from the World Trade Organizations. It's a neoliberal catastrophe anyway, and it would be better if we just operated by building an industry that was competitive with other nations of the world, including China, by using the power of our monetarily sovereign currency to subsidize our own industries. Now, that's going to have to be done very carefully, of course, but I think that is the right road, and that is a great way to use our monetary sovereignty to employ people once again and to rebuild our industrial powerhouse so that it is once again truly a powerhouse. So let us move on to the third of our topics for tonight. Well, there's Shane. Hi, Shane. Shane has been out in New York fathering signatures for Jill Stein. I think he should have said gathering signatures for Jill Stein. People don't want to sign. Why don't they want to sign? What is wrong with signing signatures to get Jill Stein on the ballot? That's very interesting. Maybe the people in New York are for Cornell and not for Jill Stein. Could be. Darren Fonzo says, National Workers' Comp Commission, Medicare for all, and state single payer do not cover our issues, just like in Canada and Australia. Darren Fonzo says, let's talk labor. That's not what we're talking here tonight, Darren. I'm sorry to tell you. What we're talking about here tonight is foreign policy. What we're talking about here tonight is the impact of Raeisi's death, the Biden-China fracas, and hypocrisy about the International Criminal Court. And we'll now go to the third of our topics, hypocrisy about the International Criminal Court, and go to a piece from Common Dreams that covers that, I think, extremely well. Here's a picture of Russian President Vladimir Putin and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu attending a joint press conference at the Israeli leader's Jerusalem residence on June 25th, 2012, in Jerusalem, Israel. The good old days, right, when Putin was very friendly to Netanyahu. This photo was by Kobe Gideon from Israeli Handout / GPO via Getty Images. U.S. cheered the ICC arrest warrants for Putin's crimes, not so for Netanyahu's. Well, it's very true, but it's debatable whether Putin did commit any crimes. But we will see. There's an indictment from the International Criminal Court for Putin. There are these other indictments coming down. Let us have the investigations. Let us have the trials. And let's see who gets convicted. Somehow, I don't think it's going to be Putin. This article is by Juan Cole, a very great blogger from the University of Michigan. He published this on May 21st, 2024. That's today. It comes from his blog, Informed Comment, and was picked up by Common Dreams. Juan Cole is a professor at the University of Michigan, and, well, he's a serious guy. Karim A.A. Khan, chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, the ICC, said Monday that he is asking the ICC to issue arrest warrants for several Hamas leaders, as well as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Secretary of Defense, Yoav Gallant. It is the first time the ICC has sought warrants against leaders of a parliamentary government. Most of the officials indicted have been from African dictatorial regimes. If the warrants are approved in a process that may take several months, Netanyahu and Gallant will join a rogues gallery featuring deposed Libyan strongman, specifically Muammar Gaddafi, deposed Sudanese dictator Omar al-Bashir, and Russian President Vladimir Putin. In March 2023, just a year ago, Secretary of State Antony Blinken asked all countries that are parties to the ICC to detain Vladimir Putin if they could after the court issued an arrest warrant for him. Russia is not a signatory to the Rome Statute that authorizes the court, but in 2015, Ukraine, also not a signatory, granted jurisdiction to the court over Ukrainian territory. It was for crimes committed in Ukraine that Putin was indicted. The reaction in Washington to the warrant request from Netanyahu and Gallant has been the opposite. This reaction shows the Biden administration does not respect international law, as if we didn't know that because of all it's been doing to support Israel in the Gaza debacle, and does not care that Putin committed crimes under it, but just wants to stick it to Putin. It is personalistic, not a matter of law, because if law was at issue, it should apply to everyone, including especially Benjamin Netanyahu, the butcher of Gaza. Everything Washington officials said in response to their request for warrants was wrong. I mean, incorrect. It isn't a matter of opinion or a difference of values. They are spewing falsehoods. It is as though they have all contracted Trumpitis and now keep compulsively telling serial lies. President Biden, apparently now the chief defense attorney for Netanyahu, denounced any, quote, equivalence, unquote, between Hamas and the Israeli leadership and said that he rejects charges of genocide against it. Well, I'm surprised he didn't say he resents charges. Maybe he both resents and rejects. Biden spokespeople question whether the ICC has jurisdiction to charge the Israeli leaders. Secretary of State Antony Blinken condemned the announcement as, quote, outrageous, unquote, and said that it threatened the success, of negotiations toward a ceasefire and a hostage release. I don't think it threatens the success of negotiations. I mean, I think it makes the success of negotiations and hostage release more likely. And maybe these people being charged, as individuals will take things more seriously, think that maybe one day they could actually pay a price because there are charges against them as individuals. Mr. Blinken did not explain why the ICC request for warrants should delay a ceasefire. The Biden administration vetoed 3 ceasefire calls at the UN Security Council earlier this year and abstained on a 4th, which it undercut by falsely damning it as, quote, non-binding, unquote. I remember that. Speaker of the House Representatives Mike Johnson said he and his colleagues would look into the possibility of placing sanctions on the ICC judges and their families. I mean, screw it. Now, this is like a mafia starting to organize to protest against a grand jury indictment of some of their members. This is what this is like. The U.S. acting like a mafia. The 18 judges are elected to 9-year terms by an assembly of the 124 states that are signatories to the Rome Statute, finalized in 2002, which authorizes the court and lays out international humanitarian law. The ICC, therefore, represents nearly 2/3 of the countries in the world. Mike Johnson represents a district in Louisiana. Well, Mike Johnson does represent the House of Representatives of the United States, but after all, the United States itself, as large as it is and as populous as it is what is it? Less than the world population is 8 billion, 800 million. So what is the United States? About 3% of the world's population, something like that. The parties to the International Criminal Court, including Britain, Canada, France, Belgium, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Norway, Denmark, Ireland, Switzerland, Japan, Spain, Sweden, as well as the state of Palestine, and large numbers of countries in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the Pacific. It took some courage to sign the Rome Statute, since the officials of the signatory country placed themselves under the authority of the judges. It is not a courage that the United States, Israel, or Russia displayed, but it's a courage the Palestinians have displayed. But we have to know who among the Palestinians subscribed to that. Was it Hamas? Well, it still may be that Hamas is subject to the court. We will see. It's not a courage that the United States, Israel, or Russia displayed, and it is disgraceful that the United States has not signed the major human rights instrument of the 21st century. So why is everything Washington is saying about the decision of Karim Khan wrong? First, the request for warrants does not make an equivalence between Israel and Hamas. The court does not judge countries, it judges individual officials. These are the charges against the 3 Hamas leaders, aside from just killing a lot of innocents. 1. Rape and other acts of sexual violence as crimes against humanity, contrary to Article 7.1g, and also as war crimes pursuant to Article 8.2e6 in the context of captivity. Torture is a crime against humanity, contrary to Article 171f, and also as a war crime, contrary to Article 8.2ci in the context of captivity. Other inhumane acts is a crime against humanity, contrary to Article 7.1k in the context of captivity. Cruel treatment as a war crime, contrary to Article 8.2ci in the context of captivity, and outrages upon personal dignity as a war crime, contrary to Article 8.2c2 in the context of captivity. Rape, torture, hostage-taking, bulk large. Here are the charges against Netanyahu and Gallant. Starvation of civilians as a method of warfare, as a war crime, contrary to Article 82b 25 of the statute, willfully causing great suffering or serious injury to body or health, contrary to Article 2a 3, or cruel treatment is a war crime, contrary to Article A2CI. 3. Willfully killing contrary to Article A2AI, or murder is a war crime, contrary to Article A2CI. What's that? 4. Intentionally directing attacks against the civilian population is a war crime, contrary to Articles A2BI or A2EI. 5. Extermination and or murder, contrary to Articles 7.1b and 7.1a, including in the context of deaths caused by starvation, as a crime against humanity. We up to 8? I forget. Persecution is a crime against humanity, contrary to Article 7.1h. And finally, other inhumane acts as crimes against humanity, contrary to Article 7.1k. I am being showed now breaking news from Bonnie, my wife, that Jimmy Carter died today, at 99. I'm sure we all regret that. He was not the greatest president in the world, but he was the greatest post-president, in the history of America, and generally recognized as a wonderful human being by and large. And I'm sure he held on for as long as he could, but that after Rosalind's death, it was probably very hard for him. Going on with the article, the charges aren't the same or equivalent at all. The Israeli officials are charged with starving the civilian population, blowing up the civilian population, exterminating the civilian population. I do have to say at this point, if Jimmy Carter were president instead of Joe Biden now, and Jimmy Carter was still alive, he would long since have stopped the shipment of arms to Israel to stop this genocide. Jimmy Carter wouldn't have been caught dead in a genocide. Going on, there is no mention of rape or torture or hostage taking. In each case, the officials are being charged for their specific actions. The Israeli officials are not charged with genocide by the ICC, contrary to what Mr. Biden alleged. The reason that the ICC is jurisdiction is that the state of Palestine has very doggedly and brilliantly arranged for that jurisdiction. First, Palestine sought to be admitted as a non-member observer state of the United Nations, the same status that the Vatican has. The UN General Assembly voted Palestine in some 12 years ago. As an observer state, it gained the right to become a signatory to the Rome Statute, which it did in 2015. Then Palestine asked the ICC to exercise jurisdiction over the occupied Palestinian territories, which had de jure been granted to the state of Palestine by the 1993 Oslo Peace Treaty, signed by Bill Clinton, Yitzhak Rabin, and Yasser Arafat. On February 5th, 2021, the ICC concluded that it does have jurisdiction over actions taken in the occupied territories. Gaza is included in that jurisdiction. Hence, the ICC can issue the request for warrants against Hamas war crimes, as well as against Israeli officials who commit war crimes or crimes against humanity in the occupied territories. It most definitely has jurisdiction. In fact, since Palestine is a party to the ICC, the case for jurisdiction here is much stronger than for Ukraine and Putin. Whoa. That is a very, I think that is a correct conclusion, and that it is very appropriate in this case. I can't see how it can be denied. I'm trying to highlight it, I guess. I am finally getting there, but it doesn't seem to, the highlight doesn't seem to be moving. But maybe I can get it moving. Anyway, there we go. Critical paragraph. Did it highlight? I don't know. Doesn't seem to be working. Maybe I need to start it from the beginning. Nope. Can't explain why it's not working, folks. Anyway, hence the ICC can issue the request for warrants against Hamas war crimes, as well as against Israeli officials who commit war crimes or crimes against humanity in the occupied territories. It most definitely has jurisdiction. In fact, since Palestine is a party to the ICC, the case for jurisdiction here is much stronger than for Ukraine and Putin. Prime Minister Netanyahu has repeatedly rejected the whole notion of a ceasefire, and contrary to Mr. Blinken's flagrant toadying, there is no prospect of any such ceasefire. Hamas offered a hostage deal on the eve of the invasion of Rafah, and Netanyahu invaded precisely in order to torpedo any deal. That is why Israelis are demonstrating in the tens of thousands against Netanyahu. If Blinken had any shame, he'd fly to Tel Aviv and join them. The ICC decision is completely irrelevant to negotiations, which have in any case collapsed and are not ongoing. Blinken is trying to blame Karim Khan for his own egregious failure as a diplomat. Unlike Khan, Blinken has done nothing to hold Netanyahu to account for repeatedly violating the Biden administration's toothless red lines. As for Mike Johnson and his merry band of GOP troglodytes, he should be careful if he'd ever like to vacation in Rio or in most of Europe. Article 70 of the Rome Statute has these paragraphs prohibiting D. Impeding, intimidating, or corruptly influencing an official of the court for the purpose of forcing or persuading the official not to perform or to perform improperly his or her duties. Retaliating against an official of the court on account of duties performed by that or another official. The court should play hardball with politicians that try to sanction its judges and should issue warrants against them. Wouldn't it be lovely to see Mike Johnson arrested while on vacation at the Copacabana beach in Rio de Janeiro and unceremoniously flown to The Hague in handcuffs? And Mike Pompeo on Trump, who did sanction ICC judges, should also have warrants out. Though with Trump, the ICC would have to get in line behind a whole gaggle of prosecutors waving warrants for an endless list of crimes. That, my friends, was a wonderful article by Juan Cole. I mean, 18 million cheers for that article. That was just an incredible tour de force, making clear the legal situation that faces these people and the stupidity of trying to sanction the International Criminal Court. With the world going against the United States also, as it is, with the world turning towards the BRICS nations and turning against the United States faster and faster each day, it's going to be dangerous to sanction the International Criminal Court. It will lead to great constraints on certain citizens of the United States who insist on being troglodytes. Of course, we can describe the 2024 election campaign as one of the troglodytes riding again. I can just hear the strains of the William Tell overture now, with words replacing any customary words with verses about the troglodytes. Because the troglodytes are riding again here in the United States with a vengeance in this election campaign, undermining the integrity of the election all over the place, trying to block third parties at every turn, while, of course, continuing to mess up the international situation by favoring a genocide by Israel. So that's the end of that one. I now turn to your comments. Okay, Darren Fonzo has tried to become a troll by basically hijacking this stream with all his various, hijacking the comment stream because he wants to talk labor and we want to talk, or I want to talk something else. It is, after all, my stream, and I get to say not what we're going to say, but what we're going to talk about. He wants to talk about a national work commission, for America's workers. We evidently on the left are all silent about a national workers' compensation uh, uh, commission. I have to say that I'm silent about a national workers' commission because I'm not familiar with the proposals, for one. It's very likely if I was familiar that I wouldn't be silent about it. So maybe I will become familiar over the next few days with it. Uh, I I told people to vote for Republicans. I told us to vote for Trumpsters. Well, we're getting a complete line of BS. Shane asks, Darren, do you really need to spam the chat? Is it really necessary? This show is about international relations. We aren't talking domestic policies tonight. Maybe come back another night. Shane, thank you for your comments. Darren, if you knew me, you would not dare suggest that I am entirely pro-labor. Well, we're not talking about it on tonight's show, Darren. We just are not. He's saying he's begged for my help for 8 years now. No, he hasn't. He hasn't begged for my help. I barely recognize Darren Fonzo's name. barely recognize his name. I've seen it before somewhere. I don't know where. Okay. Okay. Anyway, if there are any comments related to this stream, I would certainly like to see them. Oh, God. Anyway, I don't see any further comments. So, so now Darren Fonzo has started arguing with Shane Coughlin, who is doing the thankless job of gathering petitions for Jill Stein so she can, get on the ballot. Shane says, people have been very upset with the fact that she's a woman, a Russian agent, anti-Semitic. Of course, the only one of those things that's true is that she's a woman. She's certainly not a Russian agent. She certainly is not, an anti-Semite. And the people on the street evidently believe that sanctioning Israel is crazy. Well, I don't want to sanction Israel. I mean, all I want to do is stop the shipment of arms from them. If you think that's sanctioning them, well, what the hell is Darren Fonzo talking about? I don't know, but since I'm not getting any serious discussion, I am going to end this stream right at this point. I want to thank you all for coming. This was a well-attended stream, and I thank you all for coming. I will be back tomorrow, and I'm going to give you a little preview of that now. Tomorrow, I'll be talking about the stream tomorrow is probably going to be a dump the corruption day. I'll be talking some Trump and the stupidity of supporting him. I'll be talking about the challenges Squad faces in this particular election campaign. That's what I'll be talking about. So, if you come back, I think that's going to be a very good show. On Thursday, I'm going to be talking about the unit. I already had a show about that, but on Thursday, I want to go into the white paper that was written by the Unit Foundation so that I can clarify for everybody just what the hell the unit is about. By then, I may have some supplementary material to share from Pepe Escobar. He's been trying to get something out about that, but of course, he now is mired down in the implications, of the death of Ibrahim Raeisi, and I'm sure he's trying to get something out on that as quickly as we can. So there may be something on that. I may be covering that also tomorrow, okay, if it happens. Okay. Uh, so, I know what else I may be doing tomorrow. A very good chance I'll be covering some antics by Nancy Pelosi, specifically a piece from the Prospect about something she wants to do in the crypto area. She's probably figured out a way for herself to make some money, okay, in crypto. So her corruption and her disruption of the legislative process continues in spite of the fact that she's no longer the Speaker of the House. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to cover that as well, okay, tomorrow. Tomorrow, remember, I'll be on at 8 o'clock, okay, not at 9. The International Relations show is is usually planned to be a very long show, at least, okay, an hour and a half. We're a little short here tonight, but tomorrow's show is planned to be, okay, an hour, and it will cover the topics that I just covered. I killed it 8 years ago. What, are you crazy? You're crazy. Shane says they consider that sanctions. All right. Well, they can consider it anything they want. I will consider it stopping the arms shipments. Hey, Darren, don't you call me an old man. I'm 85. That is not old. Shane knows Darren Fonzo. And Shane says, Darren, no one fears workers' truths. People have tried to talk to you and work with you, but you make it impossible. Do things like this. You do not hear us folks on the bottom as we take orders from doctors' groups and Wendell Potter and so on, who never did any manual labor. Well, I hate to, disabuse you, Darren, but in my life, I have done what's normally considered to be manual labor. I kind of started out that way doing manual labor. I was doing manual labor before I went to college. And I was doing some manual labor while I was in college. Kay said good night to all. Shane said that Joe is a strong labor advocate. Instead of calling us unhinged, I never called you unhinged for fighting for a national workers' comp commission. I think you're unhinged for coming here tonight and spamming the stream. Shane says, when you act reasonable, people will engage. When you do this thing you have been doing, we will not. Shane does not know me. Shane says, you and I spoke on the phone. You accused Kay of not being in favor of this shit and then wasted my time. Well, by the way, also, Darren, this is not KRTD Media. This is my personal channel. And you refuse to hear what my doctors tell me to do. 8 years, Jason called me unhinged. Darren Fonzo, with good reason. Good, obvious reason. Okay. Good night, folks. I'm ending the stream now. Again, thank you for coming. I'll be back tomorrow at 8 p.m. Meanwhile, please go to my patreon.com account and make a contribution there if you're so inclined. Or if not, then please go to my Buy Me a Coffee account. And guess what? I forgot to flash my Buy Me a Coffee banner. So there it is. buymeacoffee.com/Joe.Firestone and my patreon.com /Joe_Firestone. They're very similar. One is Joe underscore and one is Joe.Firestone. And one is patreon.com and one is buymeacoffee.com. So, if you like these streams, you can make some contributions there. Evidently, I'm supposed to have only one comment, but I have many more than one comment. I have numerous comments. So, I'm going to end the stream now. Thank you all for coming. Even Darren Fonzo, thank you for coming. Bye.